Hi, my name is Alyssa McCormick, and I am a counselor at Bryn Mawr Middle School. So I will be giving this presentation on family dysfunction, and my audience is staff and my colleagues. So I think it's very important to let everyone know about family dysfunction and what it looks like for students and how it affects them so that we're all on the same page and we can all collaborate amongst each other and with parents so we can set up the students for success. So, looking at the agenda, first I'll talk about what family dysfunction is with some examples of it, how it affects students cognitively, and how it affects their social emotional well being, some interventions and strategies that I use, and also some coping skill strategies that everyone can use. So, we're all working towards helping the students. And finally, I'll give some recommendations. So, taking a look here at some data, this picture here in purple is from the CDC, and this is related to domestic violence. So, about 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men report having experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. So, with those numbers, we know it's pretty common, and you can imagine the amount of damage and trauma it places on a student or a child when they're exposed to it. It can really be detrimental to their learning and how they view relationships with adults and with everyone around them ultimately. Looking at this bottom picture here. So this is about substance abuse, and this is from AmericaAddictionCenters.org. So this is based on a group of 12 to 17-year-olds, and I know 12 seems pretty young, but unfortunately, we do have this problem, which requires an intervention. So in 2017, approximately 4% of the American adolescent population aged 12 to 17 suffered from a substance use disorder. This equals 992,000 teens, or 1 in 25 people in this age group. So, thinking about substance abuse, it's ultimately a coping skill when we use drugs or alcohol. It's a coping mechanism. So, we want to implement healthier coping mechanisms to try to give these students and children so that they know the healthy ways to deal with things. And our final graph here is on suicide, or is about suicide. So we can see from 2009 to 2018, it has gone from 12 to about 15. And this is deaths per 100,000 population. So we can see that there's a steady incline. And this is already about 3 years ago. So I imagine that it's gone up from then. So definitely something to be aware of and something to take into consideration. All right, so what is family dysfunction? So, according to King University, a dysfunctional family is one in which conflict, instability are common. So, when we say common, it's usually chronic. It's something that's ongoing, whether it's neglect or abuse on the child. And the way it's so not common, but the way that it's a cycle and a chain that's hard to break is because when the parents are in conflict or the caregivers are in conflict and the instability is so common, usually it's enabled by the surrounding family members, which makes it hard to break. So, some examples of family dysfunction include, but are definitely not limited to, unfortunate life events. This can be the death of a loved one, a parent's affair, or a divorce, which are very common, we know, and also even suddenly losing a job. Next, we have an insecure nature of family attachments. So we know that feeling secure attachments from a young age really sets the student up for success. So when you feel insecure, when they have an insecure nature of attachments from a young age, it's kind of hard to break that and to relearn those habits. Next, we have systemic stability or instability. So this is social, financial, political factors that influence the nature of the family. And finally, we have substance abuse or an addicted parent, which is also pretty common. So these are just kind of the common ones that are pretty typical within our school. So these are the ones that they all really have an effect, but these are some common ones. Like it's pretty common to have divorced parents nowadays, but it doesn't mean that it makes it any easier or it's less traumatic for the students to deal with. Okay, so the impact on students. So cognitive delays. When we're saying cognitive delays, I am speaking more so on delayed speech or poor language development in general. Forming and sustaining a friendly relationship. So when we talk about those secure attachments, it really does damage on kids' social and emotional skills. So it's hard for them to feel trusting with adults in particular, or even making friendships with their peers. Keeping a positive self esteem, struggling and trusting others, distress and loss of control. So, distress and loss of control leads to usually aggressive behavior or hyperactive behavior. So, just some things to look out for the teachers in the classrooms. And then denying their own reality or feelings. So, when they are constantly told, like, no, you don't feel like that, or that didn't really happen, it messes with their head in a sense, and they start to lack the true experience that they dealt with. Okay, so interventions. So interventions include small groups. There's a great resource that is called Strengthening Family Relationships, and that is a worksheet that I can provide to everyone so that you know the things that we'll be discussing, even though you won't have the exact notes or anything like that. So that is a good one. Also, secure attachments were rated more sociable with peers, more task oriented, and more socially competent. So those are lifelong skills that can be hard to develop if it's not natural or we weren't exposed to them from an early age. So low level of warmth and sensitivity that parents don't give their kids, or they have the parents have low levels of warmth or sensitivity to their kids' needs, does damage. It interferes with their emotional regulation development, placing the child at risk for poor social emotional adjustment and less positive self esteem and identity. So, next, we'll talk about some basic coping skills. So, with this, we mainly talk about distraction skills or soothing skills. So, for example, distraction skill would be watching TV or listening to music, playing a game. And then soothing skills would be for example, like, give me your five senses. What do you hear right now? Give me something you can feel. What do you see? So those kinds of activities would be soothing skills. And then we'll talk about times too when it would be beneficial to use both distraction and soothing skills. So these would really help students who are, high stress, high anxiety, even depressive. And then finally, talking about resiliency. So, resiliency is being able to bounce back after some challenges and adversities. Great skill to have. Um, Qualities that help to build resilience includes positive attitude, being optimistic, regulating emotions, and having a growth mindset. So, seeing that situations that are difficult as more opportunities for growth and to learn from. So, how can students be a part of the solution? So, because our age group is pretty young still, they may not have much control to improve their family dynamics. Sometimes it can be seen as talking back or being disrespectful when they're just trying to tell you how they feel. And a lot of it is the parents' own issues too. But what we want to do is provide a safe space for them to say how they feel. And this kind of goes back to small groups and one on one counseling. So, the strength of small groups would be the commonality. So, for example, I would do a small group with divorced slash split families, and they would feel more comfortable opening up to each other and having each other's support when they can all relate to that same situation. And I would stress the importance of confidentiality in that. So, whatever is discussed within the group stays within the group. Another one would be creating healthy boundaries. So, again, this one's a little bit difficult because parents are or the students are so young still, it may be hard for them to implement healthy boundaries to bring into their home. But what we can teach them is to not take on the feelings of anyone else but their own. So they're responsible for how they feel, and they can't or they shouldn't let others affect how they feel. I know it's hard and it's easier said than done, but we would give them some healthy boundaries and help them practice those. So hopefully, when they go home, they can start using them and it'll take some stress off of them emotionally. And then, of course, positive coping skills. Um, so, yeah, positive coping skills, they would be including like the listening to music or distracting or soothing skills. So, kind of what we already touched on. So, conclusion and recommendation. So, family dysfunction is a broad spectrum with a need for intervention. So, family dysfunction is such a kind of general term for all of these traumas that students encounter, and it needs to be addressed individually, even though family dysfunction is such a broad term. Almost everyone, especially at this age, has experienced some sort or form of trauma. So, next would be improving students' ability to cope. So, what we talked about with implementing positive coping skills and the stress of leaning on your peers and adults that you trust. Another thing that we don't really talk about or really push is involvement in extracurricular activities. So, this can be really healthy for students who don't have the best home life. We can encourage them to get involved, and that's not just something that I can do, it's something that everyone can do collectively. And it doesn't have to be sports, it can be a club or just staying after school for tutoring. If they create and build those bonds and friendships and closeness with peers and adults that they trust, it'll help take some of the stress again off of their home environment. So that's important. And then peer interaction and connections with trusted adults. So I will make myself available on campus. I know teachers do their part too to reach out when they see someone struggling in their class. So just making ourselves available that we're, known that like we're here to help. And that is my presentation. Thank you.